hemmed Christian Europe in. The Ottomans had crossed into Europe and barricaded the land routes. The Mamluk dynasty in Cairo controlled the desirable wealth of the East and traded it through Alexandria and Damascus at monopoly prices. Of the exact sources of the spices, silks, and pearls sold to the Venetians and Genoese, there were only muffled rumors. Undeterred by Cao's failure to round Africa, João persisted. The scope of his inquiry became increasingly wide-ranging. Nothing was ruled out. At his command, 2 monks set out across the Mediterranean to seek information about Prester John in the East. About Columbus's proposed western route, João hedged his bets. He licensed a Flemish adventurer called Fernão de Olmo, with the concession to sail west for 40 days with 2 caravels at his own expense and the right to whatever land he discovered, at a 10% payment of all revenues to the crown. The king effectively leased out to private enterprise a venture that he deemed speculative but could not definitively dismiss. Nothing came of these initiatives. It seems Olmo was unable to raise the funds. The monks were turned back at Jerusalem by their inability to speak Arabic. Nothing daunted, João tried again. The king had gathered around him a loyal generation of highly talented pilots, seamen, and adventurers, chosen for their talents rather than their social status, on whom he now called for a final push. In 1486, he energetically planned a triple-pronged approach to solving the India problem and locating Prester John. He would tackle the problem at both ends. A more focused expedition would sail on past Cao's pillars and attempt to round Africa. Along the way, it would drop Portuguese-speaking native Africans to seek information about the legendary Christian king in the interior of the continent. And João would rectify the failure of his overland initiative to the east by recruiting Arabic speakers who could penetrate the heartlands of the Indies to learn about spices, Christian kings, and the possibility of sailing routes to the Indian Ocean. In October 1486, soon after Cao's return, or the return of his ships, João appointed a knight of his household, Bartolomeu Dias, to command the next expedition down the African coast. At about the same time, he chose replacements for an overland expedition to the Indian Ocean. The man he recruited for this task was Pedro da Covilhã. Covilhã was about 40 years old, a quick-witted, multi-talented adventurer of lowly birth, an adept swordsman, a loyal servant to the Portuguese kings, and a spy. As well as Portuguese, he spoke Castilian fluently, and more valuably, Arabic, which he'd probably learned from the Arab population of Spain. He'd performed undercover operations for João there, and undertaken secret negotiations in Morocco with the King of Fez. It was Covilhã and another Arabic speaker, Afonso de Paiva, to whom the king now entrusted a daring operation. In the spring of 1487, while Dias was preparing his ships, the 2 men were being briefed by the Bishop of Tangiers and 2 Jewish mathematicians, members of the commission that had turned down Columbus. The adventurers were presented with a navigational map of the Middle East and the Indian Ocean, presumably the best guess available within Europe as to the world beyond the Mediterranean, probably drawing heavily on Fra Mauru's work. On May 7th, they had a last secret audience with the king at his palace at Santarém, outside Lisbon, where they were given letters of credit to pay their way on the sea voyage to Alexandria. Among those privy to this audience was the 18-year-old Duke of Beja, Dom Manuel, the king's cousin, for whom the memory of this expedition was to have a special importance. Over the summer they took a ship from Barcelona to the Christian island of Rhodes, where they acquired a stock of honey to enable them to pass themselves off in the Arab world as merchants. From there they caught another vessel to Alexandria, portal to the Islamic world. Back in Lisbon, Dias was putting the finishing touches to his matching expedition.